Unity Accelerator. Stop wasting days on asset import. Hello and welcome to episode number 12 of the Unity Performance Task Force podcast. I'm your host, Ruben from thegamedev.guru, and as usual, I'll kick things off with a question for you. Have you ever submitted a texture change at the end of the day, only to realize that 9 other developers on your team will each spend 2 hours tomorrow morning importing that same asset? That's 18 hours of collective thumb twiddling. Multiply that by your hourly rate, and suddenly you're burning a few $1,000s per texture update. Sounds familiar? If so, this episode is for you. Today we're talking about the Unity Accelerator, which used to be called the Unity Cache Server or Big Bash Server. This thing can cut your team's asset import times from literal days down to minutes. But here's the catch. Most teams either don't know it exists or they set it up wrong and wonder why it doesn't help. So let me walk you through the actual problem, the surprisingly simple solution, and the 3-step setup that actually works in production. First, let's talk about why this matters. Asset importing in Unity can take anywhere from 30 minutes to 3 full days on modern hardware. Yes, even on a brand new Ryzen workstation. I'm not exaggerating. The problem scales with your team size and asset complexity. If you're working solo on a small project, Unity's local cache handles everything just fine. But the moment you have multiple developers working on the same project, you hit the multiplication problem. Here's the stupid simple formula. Total wasted time equals the sum of everyone's individual import time. If you change 10 assets and each import takes 2 hours per person and you have 10 people on your team, that's 20 developer hours gone. Not because anyone made a mistake, just because that's how the default import pipeline works. Every time someone pulls your changes from Perforce or Git, Unity has to re-import those modified assets from scratch. One person imports, submits, and then everyone else imports the exact same assets individually. It's wasteful, expensive, and completely avoidable. I've worked on teams of 30 people where some imports take 5 to 6 hours. Do the math on that. A single asset change can cost you 150 developer hours across the team. That's nearly 4 full work weeks of collective productivity, just vanished into progress bars. The Unity Accelerator solves this with a dead simple idea. The first person or machine to import an asset uploads the imported result to a central server. Then everyone else just downloads that pre-imported version instead of doing the work themselves. Downloading over a local network is almost always faster than reprocessing a 50 megabyte texture into BC7 or ETC compression. Think of it like a shared printer cache, but for game assets. One person does the heavy lifting, everyone else gets the result instantly. There are 2 versions of this system. Version 1 is the original Unity Cache Server, which works with the old asset import pipeline. Version 2 is the Unity Accelerator, which pairs with the modern asset import pipeline version 2. Version 2 is faster and more efficient, so use that whenever possible. The core concept is identical: cache and serve imported assets to avoid redundant work. Now, when exactly does this save you time? 2 main scenarios. First, the initial project clone. When a new developer joins your team and clones the repo for the first time, they'd normally import everything from scratch. With the accelerator, they pull pre-imported assets from the server instead. Second, pulling commits. Every time someone changes a texture or model and commits it, the rest of the team would normally re-import it. The accelerator skips that. One thing to watch out for: if you accidentally import for the wrong platform, like Windows when you meant Android, you'll import twice. The accelerator can help here too, but only if someone else already imported for the correct platform. Otherwise, you're still doing the work yourself. So how do you actually set this up? you need three things: a dedicated machine, the right hardware, and proper configuration. For hardware, you need a fast SSD, not a spinning hard drive. The SSD is your bottleneck if you cheap out here. You also need decent LAN connectivity. 1 gigabit per second or higher is ideal. You can get away with 100 megabits, but anything slower and you might as well not bother. Downloading over a slow connection can take longer than just importing locally. RAM depends on team size and asset complexity. 2 gigabytes is the bare minimum. 16 to 32 gigabytes is more realistic for medium to large teams. The more concurrent connections and the bigger your assets, the more RAM you'll want. Once you have the hardware, you install the Unity Accelerator software. You can do this three ways: guided UI installation on Windows or Ubuntu desktop, headless manual installation for servers, or Docker containers for advanced setups. I'm going to walk through the headless method because it works everywhere and gives you the most control. The installation has 4 steps. First, generate a configuration file. Second, edit the config to match your needs. Third, run a dry run to verify everything looks correct. Fourth, run the actual install. Start by downloading the Unity Accelerator installer for your platform from the Unity website. I'll drop the link in the show notes. Once you have the executable, open a terminal in that folder and run unity-accelerator install sample install.json. This generates a sample configuration file. Now open install.json in your text editor. You'll see a bunch of fields. Let me walk through the important ones. Usage statistics set to false if you don't want to send anonymous data to Unity. Overwrite existing configuration, leave at false unless you know what you're doing. As user only matters on Linux, controls whether you install as root or a dedicated user. Debugging mode, leave at false. It slows everything down and you only need it if something breaks. Automatic updates. I set this to true so the server stays current without manual intervention. If you have strict QA requirements, set it to false and update manually. ADB v2 enabled. Set this to true. This enables support for Asset Import Pipeline version 2, which is faster and more efficient. There's no reason to leave this at false unless you're stuck on ancient Unity versions. Collaboration Registration Token. This is for Unity Collaborate Advanced licenses. Most teams don't need this. Leave it empty unless you're paying for that specific feature. Now for directories. Don't leave these empty. Create a short root path like C Accelerator or D Accelerator. Why short? Because Unity asset names can get ridiculously long and Windows has path length limits. You want to avoid hitting those. Inside that root, create subfolders for executable, storage, and cache. Use escaped backslashes in the JSON like this: c:\accelerator /storage. Dashboard credentials. The accelerator includes a web dashboard for monitoring stats. Set a username and password here. Don't use admin and password like I do in demos. Use something real. Security. You can run HTTP, HTTPS with self-signed certificates or HTTPS with real certificates. For testing, HTTP is fine. For production, use a real certificate so your Unity editors and browsers don't throw security warnings. Self-signed is a middle ground, but your clients will complain about untrusted certificates. Remove storage on uninstall set to false. You don't want the installer deleting your cache if you ever need to upgrade or reinstall. Save the config file. Now run a dry run to verify everything. Unity-accelerator install dry run install.json. This simulates the install without actually doing it. If you see errors about paths or permissions, fix them now. On Windows, you'll need to run this as administrator. Press Windows plus R, type cmd, then hit Ctrl-Shift-Enter to open an admin terminal. If the dry run completes without errors, run the real install. Unity-Accelerator install.json. This creates the server, sets it up as a Windows service so it runs on boot, and generates the dashboard URL. You'll see something like https://your-ip:/port. Copy that. Open the URL in a browser. If you use the self-signed certificate, you'll get a big red warning about security. That's expected. Click Advanced and proceed anyway. You'll see the dashboard with metrics like disk utilization, memory, CPU, data downloaded into cache, and data served from cache. There's even a field that estimates total time saved. I'm not sure how accurate that calculation is, but if it's above 0, you know the system is working. Now you need to configure Unity editors to use the server. You have two options: UI configuration or command line flags. For the UI method, open Unity and go to Edit, Preferences, Cache Server. Check the box to enable it. Unity will ask if you want to delete the local cache. Say yes. Then enter the IP address and port of your accelerator server. Click Check Connection. If you see connection successful, you're good. If it says connection failed, double check the IP and port. Make sure you included the port number after the IP. This sets it globally for all projects on that machine. If you want per project settings instead, go to Edit, Project Settings, Editor, and look for Cache Server Project Specific. You can override the global settings here. For the command line method, add flags to your Unity shortcut or launch script -cache server IP address -cache server port. This is useful if you're automating editor setup for new hires. So how do you know if it's actually working? Two ways. First, check the dashboard. Refresh the metrics page and watch the data downloaded into cache and data served from cache fields. If those numbers go up when you import or re-import assets, the server is doing its job. Second, check the Unity editor logs. Create a shortcut to your Unity editor executable. Right-click, go to Properties, and at the end of the target field, add this flag, -enable collab event logs. This enables verbose logging for cache operations. Now open Unity with that shortcut. Right-click any texture in your project and hit Re-import Asset. Then open the console, click the three dots, and select Open Editor Log. Search for cache in the log file. You'll see entries like Remote Asset Cache Upload and Remote Asset Cache Download. If you see those, the accelerator is working. Here's a quick test. Import an asset, check the logs to confirm it uploaded to the cache, then delete the asset from your project, re-add it, and check if Unity downloads it from the cache instead of re-importing. You should see a download log entry and the import should finish almost instantly. One gotcha when you first enable the accelerator. Your cache is empty. The first import of every asset will still be slow because it has to upload to the server. But every import after that across your entire team will be fast. If you want to pre-populate the cache, select all your assets and hit Re-import All. This takes time upfront, but means your team gets instant imports from day one. Now let's talk about when you should actually use this. The accelerator is worth it when you have multiple developers working on the same project, especially if you iterate quickly on assets. High frequency of commits means high frequency of imports, which is where the accelerator shines. It's most useful for projects with large textures. In my experience, texture compression to BC7 or ETC formats is the slowest part of the import pipeline. A single high-res texture can take minutes to import. Multiply that by hundreds of textures and dozens of developers, and you're talking about days of wasted time per week. I've seen projects where a clean import takes an entire weekend. With the accelerator, that same import finishes in a few hours. The gains are not marginal, they're transformative. But here's when you should not use the accelerator. If you're working solo, don't bother. Unity's local cache already handles this for you. If your team is small, like 2 or 3 people, and you rarely change assets, the setup effort might not be worth it. And if you don't have a fast LAN connection, definitely skip it. Downloading over a slow network can take longer than importing locally. 1 gigabit per second LAN is the sweet spot. 100 megabits might work. Anything slower, forget it. Also, make sure you use an SSD for the server storage. If you put this on a spinning hard drive, the disk will become the bottleneck, and you'll wonder why your expensive server is slower than local imports. One more thing. The accelerator won't magically fix slow imports if your target platform is the bottleneck. If you're importing for a niche platform with a slow compression algorithm, the accelerator just caches that slow result. It doesn't make the compression faster. It just ensures you only pay the cost once per asset, not once per developer. Let's recap. The Unity Accelerator solves the problem of redundant asset imports by caching the results and serving them to your team. It can cut import times from days to minutes, but only if you set it up correctly with fast hardware, good LAN connectivity, and proper configuration. Enable it when you have multiple developers, frequent asset changes, and large textures. Skip it if you're solo, have a tiny team, or lack a fast network. This is the exact setup we use at thegamedev.guru when teams tell us they're losing days per week to imports. The fix is almost always simpler than people think. It's not about throwing faster CPUs at the problem. It's about eliminating the redundant work in the first place. If you found this podcast episode useful, you can access in-depth lessons in the Unity Performance Task Force program at www.performancetaskforce.com. And if Unity Consulting is what you're after, book a free discovery call at http://consulting.thegamedev.guru. Till next time.